Let me tell you about my ex. During the relationship, I was in love. It was amazing. My heart was full. I remember laughing so much. And during the relationship, I thought this was my soulmate. Upon leaving that relationship, I'm genuinely embarrassed that I was seen out in public with that person. And I'm genuinely embarrassed that I look back and I saw that as love. And I am so glad that I've grown up and I know what scum is.
Right. I want my baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back, baby back.
Hey, hi, hello, welcome to my corner of the internet. My name is Fats, and we are talking about the books that I rated higher than what they deserved because they were either a first experience or who I was back then just was enamored with something and just for some reason threw out a lot of stars. Now, the thing about me is when I first got onto Goodreads and I first got onto BookTube, I would rank books higher if I had any amount of a good time. Because I was like, oh, a good time, or I was entertained in some way, obviously means it was good. There might have been problems, but it was good. I have 5 books here. I went through a few of them. We're going to start with a few books that are less egregious in the woes of the relationship that I had with him. And then we're going to go to the top book where I obviously had to, I don't drink. I had to have been blackout drunk for the 5-star that I gave to this last book. But we're going to start light. The first book that I want to bring up is Normal People by Sally Rooney. The reason that I want to start off with this one is in the course of me reading all of those Sally Rooney books, when I tell anybody what book they should read or what book I think is the best of all of them, I usually recommend Normal People. And I tell them it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that, and then I just kind of go into it. But of all the books, I think of all of them, Normal People is the one that I would be most likely to tell somebody to read. I would never recommend Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I would keel over before I recommended Conversations with Friends. So Normal People is the one. I didn't even make it through intermezzo. Normal People is the one that I tell people. I say, of all her books, this one is average to me, right? And I had this past weekend told somebody that, oh, I think you would like Normal People. You would probably like that. It was an average read for me. But going back to how I wrote this Goodreads review, I'm embarrassed. I said, this was extremely difficult for me to rate as I am an absolute bundle of conflicting feelings. If I simply skimmed the froth off the top of the pot, this book was lovely. It was a story of a fragile, raw, and festering relationship of 2 people drawn to each other across time. It was a push and pull of a love that felt very real around 2 imperfect people. On the other hand, when I used my brain, the motifs fell flat. BDSM was poorly represented. Working class was written like a privileged person was acting it out in a game of charades. And communication was thrown wholly out the window. The writing was trite, and the choppy style of the narrative made the book feel like a collection of fables rather than a dance between these 2 characters. On the other hand, I loved it. Ate the shiznit up, and the ending was perfect, and I felt emotions, and it was so human. On the other hand, this wasn't written all too well, and the character development was impersonal. Recently, because this is one of those books, the reason I wanted to do this video is there are some books that have never left my mind because I'm embarrassed that I didn't notice something that bothers me now, or something bothers me and it didn't come to me later how much something bothers me. And for this one, first off, the fact that I really went in and I was like, 3 stars, this was poorly written. is insane. I don't know what was going on. I think in the comparison of her body of work, that's how I was arranging stars. I was like, this isn't a 1 star because I gave 1 star to this. This isn't a 2 star because I gave 2 stars to this. So I find a star rating. Star ratings are just so dumb to me. I don't usually do them for most of my videos, but when I leave a review on Goodreads, I do leave a star rating next to those reviews. And star ratings are just so... like, I don't have words. They mean nothing. They literally mean nothing. So I would like to take the 3 away from normal people and give it a 1.75 for one major reason. Outside of the fact that I literally said the writing was horrible. And I didn't include this in that long video, but the more I think about this book, the more I am absolutely disgusted with the representation of trauma. Disgusted. The fact that you had a character who had experienced familial trauma and, oh, she's just a little bit of a whore. Like, that's kind of how the book felt. I'm not saying that's just how the book felt. It's like, oh, I couldn't deal with my familial trauma. I'm gonna be a little bit of a whore. Like, that felt like the transition that this book was trying to push. And it, as somebody who has a little bit of that familial trauma and is a whore, it's me. I'm represented. I'm represented. Okay, Sally Rooney, you got it right. However, that A to B just feels a little too, it just is so simplistic and it is so two-dimensional. But as I sat with it and after I put out an hour of a video, the thing that never left my mind, that I never talked about, was trauma. And I feel really gross when I think back to that book, and it hasn't left my mind. And I think there's a lot to say about a book that writes a motif in a way that doesn't leave you, you know? If Sally Rooney wanted to start conversations, I become infuriated with new things regularly. Those books do not leave me. Well, the other ones, I can barely remember what they were about or like what really happened. They're so forgettable to me. But Normal People sits with me. Normal People truly sits with me regularly because there are different things that make me despise it more, which again, I think it says a lot for a book to be able to make me think about it. And every day I want to sit somebody down and be like, hey, I thought of another thing that I hate. That is my first book that I wanted to bring up. The next book that I wanted to bring up is just pure embarrassment from a review. This is my review of A Court of Blood and Bindings. The world building and narrative was handled here much better than most other smut-filled fantasy. However, there were still plot holes and hiccups in discourse. The info dumping was a little difficult to wade through as it was cloudily added in. So, all that said, man, I can't even write. I had a good time. I'm going to keep reading the series for sure. I proceeded to not write that series, and I am 100% sure that those 4 stars were given purely from my hormones because I can't remember this book. I can't. And you can tell. I'm over here saying smut-filled fantasy. My hormones wrote this. My hormones. My inner hormone monster jumped out and said, star, 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 star. This was a late night rating. And I'm not ashamed by it. Okay, I'm ashamed by it because I can't remember this book at all. And I saw absolutely no reason to go forward. No reason. I don't see any reason now. And even in the fact that I was rating it by 4 stars, I didn't go forward. I didn't go forward. Oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? The next book that I would like to take some stars away from is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. This was my very first sad hot girl read. That sad, aesthetic girl, hot girl literary fiction. This was my very first one. And I think that's where the rating came from. And I said, I want to say that the way the character Oscar is written was done perfectly. Chef's kiss. And the character development in the lens of friends and relationships was poignant. Great read. I thought the character of Oscar was written well as one of those like genteel, toxic men. I thought that was done subversively really well. Whatever. Here's the thing. This is a story of a woman in her early 30s who doesn't have a handle on relationships and is dealing with the grief of the loss of her mother, as well as the grievance that is losing a relationship, a situationship, a relationship that she had been in. And then she gets into the intermixings of dating two people, which really felt like cheating on two people. Now, what sits with me with this book was the haphazard way that this was written. It was absolutely spineless. Spineless. And then the author just decided, like, let me just throw in like a perverted father. Oh, let me throw in golf. Like, it just felt odd. It felt odd. And the way that her waitressing job was just written about so much. I do want to say Writers and Lovers is the blueprint of the sad hot girl books that trend, in that there's a lot of musing, there's some kissing, and grief is written out. And the men are toxic. That doesn't get much deeper than that. And you have a representation of the customer service industry and waitress life and the absolute disgusting nature of the men in the kitchen. If you've worked service industry, the kitchen can, I'm not saying all kitchen people, I'm not saying all chefs, I'm not saying all cooks. However, a good percentage of the service industry doesn't have HR, and people are wiling out behind the line. Front of the line's wiling out too. Everybody's wiling out. Everybody's naked on their off hours. And this book shows the griminess of men who are protected in spaces where they are being harmful upon the bodies of women. That is shown. I did feel seen as somebody who used to be a waitress. I did feel seen as somebody who has no idea what's going on in adulthood and has $2 to my name. I feel seen, which is what these books do. And this was my first time reading a book that focused. Sorry, Does the mic pick that up every time? I'm so sorry about that. That's annoying. Let me just put one right there, maybe, and like hold my hand up. Sorry about that. Where were we? Oh yeah, the sad hot girl books. They have this ability to represent a piece of what it is to be a woman in America, a woman in the world, a mid-20s to early 30s body just trying to make it. That's what these books do. They give you something that feels relatable. And then from there, the plot sucks. The plot sucks. But I think back then, to be like, man, that's the service industry. Like, to feel those things, you latch onto it. You latch onto those feelings of like, oh, it's a little bit of me. 10 stars. I gave this one 4. I would like to give Writers and Lovers 2.5. 2.5. The actual way the book played out was just haphazard. It was poorly structured, but the moments of womanhood, I was like, yes. Waitressing. Getting groped at work. Yes. Felt that. Mm-hmm. Oh, you weren't supported by your manager? It was your fault? Yes. Experienced that one. Yeah, you get that. But just because you represented a piece of life and I felt a connection doesn't mean the story works well and the plot works well. I remember reading that book and feeling those moments and being like, oh yeah, me. And giving it stars and stars because I felt those points and just ignored the fact that nothing else was happening around it. And our main character was insufferable. The next one. Okay. Here's the thing about this next one. I don't know if I want to change the stars, but this is another one that sits with me a lot. And that is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Now, the review that I left for this one is, this was reminiscent of a fable in the imagery, lightness, and wise, omniscient character. The writing itself was a very straightforward, and there weren't long moments of description which added to the feeling of it being a fable. With that said, it was so well done. The message, the experience, the emotions, the character growth, the climax, the resolution, the lessons learned along the way. A book everyone should read. I gave this one 5 stars. And let me tell you what it's about before I go into how I feel about changing these stars a little bit. It's about Nora, who, again, mid to early 30s, and just feels stuck in life. She has a job that's going nowhere. She's got no money. She's going to get kicked out. She's got bills piling up. She's got debt. It's one of those, goodness, life is hard and living in this age and not seeing a future for yourself. Trigger warnings because Nora finds herself in a situation of coming into this midnight library that exists at the cusp of life and death. And within this library are all of these books that show Nora how her life would have ended up, all the alternative lives, had she taken a different choice here or there, gotten married to this person, dated this person, taken this job, pushed herself here, and all of these things that she has doubted and how she has questioned and she has wished that she'd done, she's able to see the life that would come from it. And it is a story where at the end you do get that like warm-hearted feeling of, don't doubt yourself. The life that you have is so beautiful, and the life that you live is your chosen life, and don't focus on the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. And I love that. This is one of those books where I don't know if the way it was written works. It does feel very cardboard cut out for the purpose of getting to a lesson. That's why I kept saying fable. I said fable so often in my review, but I think my use of fable was because the characters and the people within the story were tools to lead me to the lesson. Everything was put in there for the purpose of getting to this lesson in a very self-help book kind of way. I was using fable, very self-help booky, and I don't know if I reread it, if the writing style would hit me now. I just think that in the moment when you make it to the lesson, you're like, lesson. You know, it has that feeling. The same way I would say, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, the exact same way that book works. The characters themselves aren't fleshed out, and the story itself isn't fleshed out. The concepts aren't fleshed out. The magic system of this Midnight Library, not fleshed out. You're here for the lesson of that appreciation of life. So I still recommend it in the theory thereof. I don't know if it's a 5-star. I would say 3.5 to 4. I still want to give it its props. As a person with the sad, it's always nice to read something and be like, life is just so worth it. And stop focusing on the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You're here. You have what you have, and appreciate it. Appreciate those around you. I love that message. I just, looking back, I'm like, yeah, those characters weren't it. But this is another one I think back on a lot because I almost hesitate to recommend it. Somebody will want a book and I want to recommend it, but when I think on it, everything is so forgettable except for that lesson. And I don't know how I feel about that as a book as a whole. Okay, so here's the deal. This entire video was sparked by one book. Because, okay, let me explain myself. I'm not going to tell you the book yet. Please let me argue my case. Because I want to argue a 5-star. And I want to argue and say I've grown. It is a 1-star book. It's a big jump. All these other ones got like a 1.5-star loss. I want to take a 5-star read and re-rank it to one of the worst books I've ever read. But again, let me just, please, let me argue my case. I beg of you. This was the very first time I'd ever read anything that fell into the thriller category. Very first time. Before this book, I had never read thriller, mystery, or horror. So the kinds of twists and surprises that I was reading was very much within the fantasy realm. I was such a heavy fantasy reader at this point. I didn't start expanding my genres around the time of me reading this book. So the twists of this book and experiencing oh my goodness, experiencing these twists, this was brand new to me. And that feeling of the thriller feeling of each chapter ending on what? That's also not very fantasy or very, the way thriller chapters end. When I look back, the way those chapters ended, absolutely whack. But in my first time ever experiencing that, I was having a 5-star reading experience. I'm going to read you the review. Again, I'm not putting it on the screen. I'm still arguing my case. Okay? From the very first chapter to the very last chapter, I was on the edge of my seat. This was such a fast read for me because I could not be left without knowing what happened next. I was dragged through so many emotions: fear, anger, disgust, appall, hurt, confusion, all directed at the same character. The author dangled the ending right in front of my face, and I still didn't know what to expect. The last pages had me pleasantly aghast. You see, I was just enamored with the twisties. I promise. Have you guessed it yet? It's Verity by Colleen Hoover. Oh, I'm so embarrassed by this. For those of you who haven't read it, let me tell you about it. Let me tell you about the book. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. So you have a woman. Her name is Lowen Ashley. She's a struggling writer on the brink of financial ruin, and she's been given a job offer of the lifetime. The husband of the very famous Verity Crawford has hired her to complete the remaining books of a very successful series. His wife has been in an accident, and she is unable to speak or move her body. So she is unable to finish this series. In order for Lemon to come in and do her job, she is going to live with the family and work out of the office, which has notes, scraps, edits, all of that, right? So then, Lauren, what is this girl's name? Lauren, Lemon, Lowen, Lulu, Lagoon, whatever her stupid little name was. She comes in and she lives in the house, right? And this home wrecking is reading through these papers, and she finds a manuscript. I'm going to get to the stupidity of this in a second, because it's just titled Autobiography of Verity. And trigger warnings, the Verity autobiography is riddled with child abuse and just evil Verity actions. Verity is this obsessive, evil woman that just is insanely enamored to an obsessive point with her husband, Jeremy. and you get her autobiography as told surrounding this man. You don't get much of Verity as a person, because Verity is just this vessel that really wants to touch the privates of this man. The horniness of Verity for this man is insane. I'll get to more of that in a second. My first problem. So Lowen has found this autobiography, right? And she goes, I'm going to read 1 chapter a day. So you've got a book that has crazy stuff going on, right? It's absolutely balls to the walls insane. And you're going to read 1 chapter a day? Let me lock this door and I'm going to finish this book tonight. This entire story hinges on the fact that Lowen's dumb ASS was reading this book at a snail's speed. She would like finish a chapter and be like, well, it's time for me to go to bed. Like go to bed and then go fuck the husband. Every time. And it was just kind of like, and like the ridiculousness of this book, the ridiculousness. There is a scene where Lowen and the husband, he's like mouth on titty. And the wife that's supposed to be unable to move is like standing up at the top of the stairs. And Lowen's like, and then Verity scampers off. And it feels very much like this. That is how I felt about this book. That is how I felt about it. That is how I felt about it. That is how I felt about it. My goodness gracious. It like Verity just like scampering around and being like, like peeking around everywhere. And Lowen just being horny. Are we not going to focus on the husband having obviously the most unhinged breeding kink? Are we not going to talk about that now that we're in the spice world? For those of you who have read it, the scene of the teeth, right? There's a bed. Lowen's getting her back broken in half in their marriage bed, the bed that Verity and her husband used to have. Verity now sleeps in her own room because she needs nurse care, right? There are these teeth marks on the edge of the bed. Teeth marks. Because Verity had been getting her intestines rearranged with such a voracity that she bit down into a wooden headboard. And then Lowen got her comeuppance in the exact same fashion, and she put her teeth in the same grooves. And if you just want a quick 30 seconds of what this story is all about, here you go.
First question. Who's the biggest, toughest guy in this house?
Well, I don't like to toot my own horn, but I believe I hold the distinction of...
My house now, bitch! Now who's the funniest?
I know my way around a joke.
For God's sake, Dad, have some humility. It'll save your life.
I've got one more problem. So, Verity's out here. Spoilers. And she's faking it, right? I told you she's just kind of scurrying around, faking like she is completely unable to speak, move, do anything for herself, right? You're telling me that she just sat so still and she tricked all these doctors and nurses. I would like to say that Colleen Hoover is spitting in the face of the medical field by saying she laid so still and nobody over the course of several years has been able to figure it out? Nobody. But she's scurrying around and peeking at you all day. What are we saying? Verity is such a rich doctor. You're telling me that her funds wouldn't have brought in some doctors that knew what they're... No, Colleen Hoover is spitting in the face of the medical field by saying she just played it off so well, and modern medicine had no idea that she was a fully functioning woman. The graphic sex scenes are wild in this book. Absolutely unhinged. I don't know why I was reading this. I don't know why I needed to get to the next page. This woman is reading a book really slowly, wrecking this household and trying to replace the wife. And then Verity was just kind of like peekabooing her way around the narrative. That was what this whole book was, and I ate it up. And I would just like to say, it just speaks to that like first experience of something new. And I don't think I would have had these thoughts if I didn't read more and get into more genres and experience this horror and real twists and real fear and experience a good thriller. This is my first thriller. I'm going to continuously argue it. Anybody who follows me on Goodreads and you see my 5 stars, I was a different person back then. In 2023, 2 years ago. I started my reading journey back then. I promise I'm better now. Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed by it. Thank you for hanging out. I am so curious about any books that you've rated a 5-star that you're embarrassed of. Give me your worst of the worst, your Colleen Hoover Verity moment where you look back and you're like, what was I on? I'll argue for you. I won't even judge you. This is a safe space. These comments are safe. You can trust me. I'm gonna laugh at you. Mostly because I really just need to stand in solidarity with other people. So please tell me books that you want to take some stars away from if the person you are today went back to read them. I didn't change any of these ratings in Goodreads. They got me. In the moment that they existed for me, they did what they did. My neighbor's dog is outside absolutely running amok. So I think that's all for me. Thank you for taking some time in the living room with me today. I am slowly getting out of this wretched sickness, and hopefully we'll be out and about in the neighborhood going to the same 2 coffee shops that I like to go to. My fever's come down and I'm kind of getting my voice back. It's just sore. Like, you know, when your throat is just like really sore in one area, so you try to like force your voice around the soreness, but when you relax, it kind of hurts. I'm in that, like trying to avoid how sore my throat is, which is really weird. I also wake up in the morning congested. So I do think I'm at the end of it. I hope all of you are not getting sick and you haven't caught anything that's going around. You better be in those comments telling me your business. Thank you for making this a safe space and not judging me for my horrible taste. And I will talk to you next time.